The caller thought the gun might be fake. That bit of information was not relayed to them. The officer who shot the boy told reporters that it was his first year on the force, and accompanied by an officer with at least a decade of experience, saw the pistol sitting on a table and watched the boy grab it and put it in his waistband. You know how this story ends. The 12-year-old was killed. And in this day and age, I find that we very often need to do something, immediately. When tragedies like this happen, what has to be done immediately? And in Cleveland, you can imagine the type of impact that this tragedy had on those police officers, on that department, on everyone involved, the community as a whole. And so there has been a development in this story. Cleveland's police union is considering a lawsuit against replica gun makers in the hopes that those manufacturers will stop making them look so real. Cleveland's Police Patrolmen's Association attorney Henry Hillo said the realistic-looking replicas put police officers and the community in danger. His quote, "We believe as a union and a community that something has to be done. It puts too many people at risk." Interesting proposition. I got an interesting guest to discuss this situation, and this guy knows his stuff. He is Edwin Walker. He's a program attorney with U.S. Law Shield, one of the country's leading voices on Second Amendment issues, and he joins me by phone tonight. Mr. Walker, thank you for your time, and welcome to WCCO.
Well, thank you for having me.
A little bit about yourself, your background, and the work that you do.
All right. Well, yes, I'm a program attorney with U.S. Law Shield. We are a legal services company that is membership-based, and in the event, what we do is we educate our members with regard to firearms and self-defense issues. And if any of the members of U.S. Law Shield have an incident where they've had to use their firearm or other weapon to defend themselves, somebody else, their property, then they will have legal representation provided for them and at no additional cost other than their membership fee.
Will you share with us the thoughts that you had, the immediate knee-jerk feelings that you had when you were aware of this story back in 2014?
Well, it was obviously a great tragedy. I mean, the child was killed. The police officers obviously didn't, they put in a very, very difficult position. And that's one thing that I really, I do sympathize with the work that police do and the difficult situations they put in with regard to trying to make those split-second decisions, deciding not only is an object a gun, but then actually having to decide whether or not it's a real gun, a fake gun, toy gun, whatever that case may be. And certainly nobody wants to have to make those decisions. Unfortunately, police officers do, and it's a tragedy. It was a tragedy for all concerned. But with regard to this lawsuit, one thing I was struck by is I'm kind of failing to see where the Cleveland Police Officers Union has standing to bring such a lawsuit. And that's why I kind of have the feeling that since this press release was put out that the Cleveland Police Officers Union is thinking about probably maybe filing a lawsuit against the toy manufacturer, that it probably is done, that this statement was put out for the purposes of getting people to start to discuss this issue and ultimately probably won't result in any sort of litigation.
How often does that happen for people as they hear the news and digest the news and these types of things come up? For an understanding and education for the audience, how often does this kind of thing happen, and could you give another example of it?
Another example of people threatening to file a lawsuit?
Well, putting out a press release, yeah, effectively, to try to, as you said, begin that conversation.
Well, with regard to toy guns and toys in general are regulated usually on the federal level through either the Consumer Product Safety Commission or the Federal Trade Commission. And so this probably, this lawsuit can be seen as sort of an impetus to start to do that. One of the things that's kind of unusual is obviously whenever you file a lawsuit, you have to have a defendant. There has to be a person or an entity that you're specifically going after. And I think I've not heard any or seen any press about who was the actual maker or manufacturer or marketer of this particular toy gun. And of course, then you sort of have to look at the world with a more broad view. If toy guns, if you go out to toy guns now, then, you mentioned airsoft guns earlier. Those are extremely realistic looking. Then you have, of course, starter pistols. And, if you get right down to it, I mean, if you're a police officer and you see somebody holding just something that is black and in the shape of an L, you can assume, that there's a great danger that would be assumed to be a gun.
Yeah, I remember the scene in Casino. There's a scene where a mobster is shot because the police, he had a sandwich wrapped in tinfoil, and it was just, one of the more memorable scenes in that film. But a great example of how it is so hard. I mean, I think about those officers, and I am sympathetic. It's a special person that puts that chooses to be in that situation, and then ultimately this kind of scenario finds you, and it's tragic. And I have struggled with this in my mind. And then when this story came out, I'm thinking to myself, let's say somehow that ultimately, one way or another, through this lawsuit or otherwise, that you're able to, put some type of control on the manufacturing of toy guns. Very similar to the argument that we have much more regularly about regular guns is, what about the ones that are already out there?
Well, there are some states out there that do have regulations with regard to toy guns. I mean, that's why we see toy guns that are, they're not made in black anymore. They're made in bright colors. They have some sort of generic gun design. They're not designed to look like Beretta Model 92s or Glock 19s. And, Nerf guns, those obviously don't look like any type of realistic firearm. So there is, there are toy manufacturers out there, and there are state laws. I believe California has one on the books, which do regulate the sales of toy guns to say that they can't look like real guns. And and it's a consumer regulation also that airsoft guns have orange tips on them. Of course, they're easily removed, but they're supposed to be, if you use them according to the way they're manufactured, you can't take off the orange tip. What's interesting is this lawsuit would be much more realistic, I guess, if it were brought by Tamir Rice's family.
Exactly.
I could obviously have seen them bringing this type of lawsuit, because they would just need to allege that, look, he had this product, he used the product as it was intended, and it was completely foreseeable that the intended use of this product would result in death or bodily injury.
We're talking with, this is Edwin Walker, a program attorney with U.S. Law Shield, one of the country's leading voices on Second Amendment issues. And again, thank you so much for your time tonight. I want you to know, for the folks listening, the phone lines are open. Would love to hear your opinion on this and your questions, because, boy, does this issue bring up a lot of good questions. You have quite a conversation on this. 651-989-9226. or 866-989-9226. And, of course, text lines open for you, 81807. The toy industry, in this particular article that I'm reading, they say the Toy Industry Association was not immediately available for comment. Well, you're going to have to single one of them out to ask for a comment. It had previously released a lengthy statement, though, stating that toys themselves do not promote aggressive behavior. Their quote, quite often, military and other role-play items may help kids work through or cope with what is happening in the world around them through play rather than through outwardly aggressive behavior. How do you feel about a statement like that?
Well, I mean, we've had toy guns for centuries. Ever since there's been real guns, we've all had toy guns. Whenever I was a kid, all the guns look like 19th century Colt peacemakers, or M16s. They look like the old style, Vietnam era M16s with the big wide stocks and the big foregrips. And so, and I loved playing soldier, and I loved, collecting soldiers, and, toy guns, part of my childhood. And so, I don't know that I think that the toy, that particular statement that you read, maybe there was a little too much pop psychology in it.
Yes.
I think kids just want to be kids, and kids have always wanted to run around playing adult type of roles, which included cowboys, Indians, soldiers, cops and robbers. All of those, of course, involve the use of fake guns.
It's such an important discussion, tough questions that need to be answered. I can recall growing up in southern Minnesota, Owatonna, my dad made for me and my brother very authentic-looking guns. I thought the old gangster Tommy gun from the 1930s was such a cool look to it. My dad made me one. It looked like the real deal. And I'm thinking to myself as we go through this story, I'm like, I'm so grateful that when my brother and I were, playing like that we lived out in the country, that we didn't live, in the city where, God forbid, an unfortunate incident, a tragedy like this could have happened. And my goodness, it's such
and also, I think you have to look at the times in that I don't think that back whenever you were a child, back when I was a child, that the thought of a child committing some sort of crime with a gun was almost inconceivable.
Yes.
In fact, it was. So the police really had no reason to think that seeing a child with what appeared to be a gun, their first instinct would have been, oh, that's just a kid with a toy gun. Now, unfortunately, it appears that their first instinct is, oh, that's a kid with a real gun.
That's a great point. What a tough scenario. I hope that we can get to some kind of resolution on this situation and make our world a safer place. Edwin Walker, thank you so much for your time on this Friday evening, and I hope that you have a tremendous weekend. Oh,
yes, sir. Well, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure. And, anytime you have any other issues involving firearms rights, self-defense rights, I'm always available to speak with you about it.
I'll save that number. Edwin Walker, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Coming up next, you may not have gone to the Twins game tonight, and I checked the latest. The Red Sox have tied it. Tied at 3, bottom of the 9th, Red Sox and Twins. And so even if you're not at the game tonight, I'm going to take you to the ballpark just the same. It's coming up next after a check on weather. News Radio 830 WCCO.